Jets Journal crew's been working overtime to bring the most comprehensive coverage of another regime in shambles. Team President Steve Guttman appears on the show with various mutterings, some of which seem directly out of X-Files scripts. Rich Kotite one-on-one as well. We'll be back.
If you take your emotion out of this, and I did, I think there's only one thing that can happen, and that should happen, and that is that the head coach should not be here. I was not fired. I'm not quitting. But weeks ago, talking to Mr. Hess and also to Steve, I thought that this is the only way to go. We have every week fought, played hard, and come up short. And I think the thing that is very important to me, this has always been a family affair to me. This is not 2 years. This is 9 years. But I don't want to lose the fans for the Jets. The fans are great. When I was here in the 80s, we had some winning years, and I tell you, they're terrific fans. And I think we have some pretty darn good football players here. And I think, and as I told them today, and I think it's important you understand this, I think sometimes the greatest growth that any individual has is during adversity. And we hit a lot of adversity this year, and this team hung together. They played hard for the most part. They practiced hard. They didn't point fingers. And I think a lot of good's going to come out of this in the final analysis down the road.
Hi, everybody. I'm Al Troutwig along with Marty Lyons, and this is in no way, shape, or form the Heineken Jets Journal that we had planned for you this week. On Thursday night, an icy wind blew into New York City, and here at Hofstra, again, winds of change. Rich Kotite out.
Al, we knew it was going to happen sooner or later, but the one thing in life is everything is timing. And Richie Kotite felt 2 days before the last game, he wanted to address his team. He wanted to step aside, take himself out of the equation to give his team an opportunity to have the fan support, to have the respect that they deserve.
Still to come, we will hear in a one-on-one interview with the coach, Rich Kotite, as he prepares to coach his final game. The president of the Jets, Steve Guttman, will also be along, plus we'll also have player reaction. Now, there has already been some public reaction as to the absence of Leon Hess. My take on this, Marty, was that the last time Mr. Hess did this, when he fired Pete Carroll, I think the residual effect from a public relations standpoint and seeing that clip over and over and over again was not something he wanted to repeat.
Well, Al, I agree with you, but I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Hess also, and I think that Richie Kotite said it all in his interview. Number one, this is a family here. He didn't get the job done. He realizes that. Mr. Hess realizes, Steve Guttman realizes. So what Richie did was he showed the type of individual he is, the type of class person he is. He removed himself.
The Jets aren't saying whether it's a firing or a resignation. Either way, Rich Kotite no longer the coach of the New York Jets after Sunday's finale against the Miami Dolphins. When we come back, we'll sit down with Steve Guttman, the president of the organization. This is the Heineken Jets Journal. You are watching Heineken Jets Journal. Heineken, true to the original recipe since 1886. And brought to you by Payne Weber. When you invest with Payne Weber, you invest with more intelligence. Steve Guttman addressed the media today at the training complex out here on Long Island. You could sense the real pain that he had because of his affection for Rich Kotite.
But you could also sense that there was a lot of media out here that wanted more heads to roll than Richie Kotite.
We did get a chance to sit down with the president of the organization, Steve Guttman. Here's how that conversation went. Steve, I think there's some wonder as to why Richie wanted this to happen today, now, before the last game. The timing of it seems strange. Why?
Richie wanted an opportunity to talk to the football team in an atmosphere that he could relate to them while they were preparing for a game, while he had their attention, while they weren't wrapping it up and wondering what time their flights departed. And he wanted to do that in an atmosphere that wasn't in a crisis or a circus. It was an opportunity to do it in a good way, good gentlemanly way.
So it wasn't because after last week he just said, I can't take this anymore?
No, that isn't what happened at all. As a matter of fact, he's going to coach Sunday. He's going to be out coaching again Sunday. He's preparing the team right now, as he has been all week. They've been doing game plans and working as hard this week as he ever has in his entire career. He just, Monday, felt that we should really examine the inevitability of this all and try to bring it to a conclusion in such a way that because we had this mutual understanding among ourselves that it was going to be time to change head coaches, that he would step aside and have an opportunity to address the team and the media without being in an atmosphere of crisis.
You've always steadfastly, no matter who was the coach, no matter what was going on, that seasons are judged after 16 games. But this sort of accelerates things a little bit, don't you think?
Well, not really, because as I tried to explain during our give and take during the press conference this morning, we had this meeting scheduled for the Monday after the season, for December 23rd. And on this past Monday, after the game last weekend, after the game against the Eagles last weekend, Richie came in and expressed a desire to bring the process to a point, since it was inevitable, and since we had all felt it as members of the same family, as members of the same group, since we were all feeling the same things, he felt it was a good idea to take advantage of the situation instead of to be wholly beaten by it. And one of the ways to take advantage was to come out and talk to his team and talk to the media and let them know how things stand.
One of the reasons that seemed prevalent among a lot of the players, at least as they talked about their frustrations, was a lack of discipline. If you agree with that, can you at least say whether you think that a more disciplined coach, or at least a coach more geared towards that, was someone that you'd like in the future?
Okay, I can't agree with it. I don't know that there's any standard of discipline or lack of discipline that can be applied on an empirical or mathematical basis. I think coaching football is a give-and-take proposition. The man's style, the player's style, how they react with each other is what determines what works.
But if you hear from players who come from outside organizations, say the 49ers or organizations that have been successful, and they talk about little things like the way practices were run or helmets being worn or just the things that set sort of a military style of success in other places, do you take that into account?
Of course it's taken into account. It's also taken into account that there are places where players practice without equipment all week. And there are places where players practice in a much more informal atmosphere all week. And some of those teams win and some of those teams lose.
It happened with Joe Walton. It happened here now, the football man mentality, the guy who sort of keeps an eye on the entire league while the coach simply focuses on the team.
Right.
And in both situations, coaches were undermined perhaps by this scenario. Is that something that you think you may have learned from this?
We're going to look back at every event that we can examine in the history, recent and past history of the football team.
Is this one of those?
And we're going to look at every single event and try to apply to the future the lessons that we think were learned and that have to be amended or altered or judged to be done in a different manner. I can't be more specific because we haven't completed the process, and when the process is completed, you're going to be faced with an evolution or result or a pattern of what happens, but without knowing everything that's been considered, discarded, evaluated. It's not going to do that.
I think you know how the fans feel. It's been as frustrating as it's been for you personally. They've made their statement by not coming to the games. Can you say something to them?
Well, the fans are our most important consideration. We have millions of Jet fans. We have more fans watching us on television on a regular weekly basis than any team in the National Football League. The Jets are the most watched team on television. And our fans include that great body of people in addition to the people who buy the tickets to our ball game and listen to us on the radio and read in the numbers of millions of newspapers in the greater New York metropolitan area and throughout the world. We're terribly concerned about the fans. The absence of fans at games is partially attributable to the way we play. It may also be attributable to some other considerations. And I could enumerate a few of them, not as excuses, but just as examples, including perhaps weather, including perhaps people having other things to do on a particular day. But certainly the great number of fans who have stayed away are not there because they found it wasn't entertaining enough to be there after having paid for the ticket. That's a terrible concern of ours, and we address it all the time. I hear from fans, without exaggeration, numbering in the hundreds every week, by telephone, by letter, by personal contact. I answer every single fan that I can. Anybody who tells me who they are or how to get in touch with them gets a direct and individual response from me.
Finally, as you stood in this room today, did you think to yourself, boy, I've been in this room far too often in the past few years, and I've got to make sure I don't come back here for a long time?
Well, I would hope that that's the case, that I've been at that podium for the last time. But, you know, the inevitability of sports is that over time, there's a cycle. We hope to get a winner. We will get a winner. This team will win the division. This team will make its fans happy. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
Well, Marty, while saying a lot, Steve Guttman doesn't really say that much. He doesn't want to reveal exactly what this organization feels they need and which direction they may go, but you know it's an important decision for him.
Well, I think, number one, they will not make the same mistake twice. This team knows that last year in the offseason, they went out and they got the best available quarterback Neil O'Donnell. They went into the free agency world and they spent the money. Look for them to do the same thing in finding that new head coach.
2 very long, hard seasons under Rich Kotite. That's the subject as we take you to the Sprint In Touch moment.
While Rich Kotite has said he had to be unemotional about this quote-unquote organizational decision for him to step aside, Kotite was very emotional, in touch with his emotions, if you will, when on the sidelines. Caring was not his problem. Whether a late field goal, drop pass, botched play, or the reality setting in about another loss, Rich Kotite was a portrait of frustration for all that went wrong. The In Touch moment is presented by Sprint, the official telecommunications provider for the New York Jets and the National Football League.
Today that the announced game that the Rich Kotite era as coach of the New York Jets was over, even though he does have one more game to go on Sunday against Miami. I thought the timing of this was pretty bizarre.
Well, there's no good timing to step away as a head coach, but Richie Kotite felt, number one, I owe it to my team. I owe it to address them. This is the time that I chose to remove myself as the head coach. Let's do it before the first game. Let's hope it's not going to be another distraction going into the game against Miami.
With Steve Guttman looking on in support, Rich Kotite addressed the team before this Friday practice, then stepped onto the practice field, then stepped into the lens of our MSG camera with Marty Lyons.
Timing is everything. Why 2 days before the last game?
Well, a number of reasons. First of all, I thought it was the best for everybody here, the Jets. I wanted to talk to the team, look them in the eye. You know how it is after the season. They get their physicals, they leave, and all that stuff. And I just wanted to talk to them because this is something that is important. I'm just like you're part of the Jet family. I am as well. I always will be. You always will be. I just thought the timing was right. It's the only thing. I just felt it in my bones.
And you mentioned the fans. How important was it for you to relate to the fans that you understood their frustration too?
Oh, I've always understood that. You know, Mr. Hess, Steve, myself, you know, we've always talked, been on the same page. We have the same goals. And I saw how the fans were getting more and more frustrated with each loss. I don't want this team, an organization, to ever lose the fans. With a lot of responsibility and being the head guy, you know, the buck always stops with the head coach. I believe it should always be that way, and a change is going to take place, and hopefully it's going to be for the better. I think we've got a lot better football players now than we had when we first got here a couple of years ago, but I'm a New Yorker. You know, this is my home. We work very hard. It seems that the losing kept piling up, and now we've got the Miami game, and I wanted the players' heads to be clear walking out on that field on Sunday and go and, you know, and play Miami and play them real tough. You know what a great rivalry it is.
What will you tell your players for one last time before that game?
Don't leave anything in the locker room. Give it everything you got, because that's what we're going to do, and they will, because they're good. They're a good group. I also told them something I think is very important. When you're hitting a lot of adversity and tough times, you know, that's when the greatest growth occurs in any person. And I think before it's all said and done, this season, somewhere along the line, is going to make them better football players, make them more focused, better professionals, because they hung in there together. They stuck together. They didn't stop pointing fingers. And I believe the last taste in our mouth, I want it to be a good taste, playing Miami and hopefully beating them.
Maybe a little fishy, too?
Well, maybe, but you've been involved in great games with the Dolphins, and certainly I have. This is not my second year with the Jets. It's my 9th year with the Jets. I want it to happen for the Jets. I want it to happen this Sunday, and I want them to do the things they have to do to take this team to the next level.
And for the next head coach that's coming in, who are going to be some of those young players or the players that they can build on?
They got a lot of them. They have the Corbettes, the Keyshawn Johnsons, the O'Dwyers. We've got good veterans that we signed in free agency that are still in the prime of their careers. The Marcus Coleman, Hugh Douglas is going to be a great player. I mean, there's a bunch of them. Cascadden has really showed what he's made of since Mo Lewis was hurt. So I think there's a pretty darn good nucleus here and a good blend of younger and older players. But nobody's really over the hill, especially the players that we signed in free agency. If they can keep them healthy, then they're going to have something going.
And one thing, Richie, that you emphasized today, that you were stepping aside. You weren't resigning. You weren't being fired. What's the real distinction?
Well, there is a distinction because I wasn't fired. I was part of the decision-making process, three of us, and we had a plan. We had expectations. They weren't great expectations. Mr. Hess didn't say, go, you got to win a Super Bowl. I think it was very fair to become a respectable, good football team, and we never did. So I think if you take the emotion out of it, you can't defend 3-13 and 1-14. Change had to be made, and I agreed with it.
And when it's all done after the Miami game, what are the plans for Richie Kotite in the future?
Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm focused on that. It's always been a privilege to be in this league and as a player and also as a coach, and certainly a privilege to work for the people at the Jets. I don't know. I go back to Joe Torre a year ago. They didn't have a whole lot of great things to say about him, and look what he's the manager of the world champion. So, we always get off the mat.
So there's hope that Richie Kotite...
There's always hope. I don't know which direction it will take, but I think you learn something from it. I think you turn the page, you learn something from it, and you can live with it a lot easier if you know that you gave it every ounce of energy you had. And we have. And we want to see if we can finish on a good note.
On days like this, it's always interesting to see how the accountability gets spread around, and now it's going to be the players' turn.
Well, Richie took the responsibility for a 1-14 season. He stepped aside. Now it's important for the players to look themselves in the mirror and realize that they were also responsible for that record, to make the adjustment, do the self-criticism, and see what they come up with.
Well, let's see if that is their take on things.
This is how this business is, and for the last 2 years we hadn't done anything to warrant stay of a lot of people, and he's a guy who's taking the fall for a lot of guys.
I'm disappointed for him. I'm disappointed he didn't get the win. He didn't come in and turn the team around that he wanted to. So I'm more disappointed for him as far as the team or myself. We're glad that we know what's going to happen now. He's stepping aside. We know we will have a new coach, and that's kind of relieving a little bit.
I think he did it in a way that he maintained his dignity. He did it with humility and with grace, and it was in maybe a better way than when we're all taken off and all gone our separate ways, having to read about it. Being able to do it, face to face with us, his players, which is a better way than I think us reading about it or hearing about it from another source.
I think it's unfortunate that the pressure led him to do that right now. We have one game left, but as you know, y'all can be kind of a handful after a while. And again, I think as quick as this can hurry up and get over with, the better off all of us will be. If everybody get out of this locker room, everybody get their mind back on Miami, we'll be fine.
While it's difficult to see why professional athletes can't discipline themselves, some members of the Jets still think they need someone who's more disciplined to guide them.
You need a coach to come in and kind of put his foot down, and a lot of players did what they wanted to do, kind of ruled a little bit. So I think you need a little coach to come in with some authority, throw his weight around a little bit, but at the same time, you don't want no coach to come in and try to throw his weight around too much and have all the players hating him and not want to play for him. So that can happen too. So but we need this little discipline right here.
Well, Marty, we've heard from all the primary parties. Any summary?
Well, I think the big thing you have to do is put it behind you, because there's one individual coming to town on Sunday, and that's Dan Marino with the Miami Dolphins. He doesn't care that Richie Kotite resigned. He's coming here to light up the scoreboard.
As we continue on the Heineken Jets, we'll look back and show you one of the reasons why Rich Kotite was in the position he was in today. A frustrating loss to the Philadelphia Eagles. In recap in a moment. The Payne-Weber play of the week put the Jets in the driver's seat. Aaron Glenn picked off Ty Detmer and ran 13 yards for the TD, his second of the season. As you know, after that, the car wouldn't start, and the Eagles raced right by him. Settling the score with Eagles quarterback Ty Detmer after their verbal joust during the week. Late in the first quarter, Detmer was picked off by Marcus Coleman, who set up the Jet offense at midfield, and then the men in green took full advantage.
2nd and 10, and a flea flicker. Burrell goes back to Foley. They have Keyshawn Johnson, and the Jets have a touchdown.
With the Jets nursing a 10-point lead, Glenn Foley led the Eagles back in it. This pass was picked off by Michael Zordich. 4 plays later, it was a 3-point game.
Detmer with time, going up the middle, and the pass is caught by Irving Pryor. Touchdown, Eagles.
On the Eagles' next possession, Detmer tried Pryor again, but Aaron Glenn broke it up. Detmer tried it again on the next play, but Glenn was there once again.
Detmer's pass is intercepted by Aaron Glenn. That's an easy Jet touchdown. That's all on Irvin Pryor, and he knows it too.
On the Eagles' next drive, the Jet defense did it again. Chad Cascadden stripped Detmer, and Hugh Douglas recovered at the Eagle 28-yard line. After Foley scrambled for 12, the drive stalled, and Lowry came on to give the Jets a 13-point lead.
Lowry's kick is good.
This is where the game turned. Foley's sideline pass was picked off by Zordich again. Miscommunication or not, this was a pass that should have never been thrown. 2 plays later, the Eagles seized the lead.
Pressure on Detmer, and the pass, Irving Pryor, touchdown, Philly.
With 5 minutes left and only needing a field goal, the Jets still had a chance, but Foley's pass was tipped and intercepted by William Thomas. 4 INTs for Foley, 5 turnovers in all, and another lost weekend.
It's a shame because the offense lost the football game. The defense played well enough to win, and being the quarterback, falls on my shoulders.
If you look at statistics and statistically how teams do when they turn the ball over, you can survive with 1 or 2, but any more than that, pretty much you're sunk.
Well, in all respects, this feels like the wrap-up show, but it's not. We'll have that next week. I think what Jet fans need to remind themselves is that, at least in my mind, this is not some rebuilding process. I always believe that the players that they had, and now with another first pick, this organization could have done a lot better.
They do. They have the talent here. They can make it to the playoffs. But what they have to do is develop some self-respect, some discipline, some good work habits. Not a reflection of Rich Kotite, but more importantly, a reflection of themselves.
Maybe that can happen just a little bit on Sunday when they take on the Miami Dolphins. We'll see you next week, and we'll wrap up this season for the Jets on the Heineken Jets Journal. With Marty Lyons, I'm Al Troutwig. Thanks for joining us. You've been watching Heineken Jets Journal. Heineken, true to the original recipe since 1886. And brought to you by Payne Weber. When you invest with Payne Weber, you invest with more intelligence.